Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone.
I dedicate today's program to my beloved friend Roberto, who died at 31 in 1999. Roberto was not his given name, but I called him Roberto. He often called himself Robert. He suffered hell. Roberto's mother was addicted to heroin. She disappeared when Roberto was in 6th grade. Probably she was murdered, but as far as I know, her body was never found. Roberto was sent to live with his uncle, who beat him and had sex with him. Crazy making. To have the same person beat your body and have sex with you. But sadly, that is what millions of women have suffered for thousands of years from their husbands or their boyfriends, both beatings and sex from the same man. For many years, Roberto was severely addicted to sniffing spray paint, smoking cigarettes, to booze and other drugs. And like many gay and bisexual men, Roberto felt torn inside between religion and his sex with men. Torn inside between his family and his sex with men. His family accepted his smoking cigarettes in slow suicide far better than his sex with men. The skies of Roberto's life were often dark and cloudy, but at moments the brilliant sunshine broke through. Roberto's tenderness, his affection, his tears, his heart in conversation with me. He opened his heart. He shared his naked body with me. I mailed a photo of Roberto and my friend Steve, both naked, lying on my bed where I used to live, to my dad in Illinois. My mother had already died at that time. Roberto and I often told each other, "I love you." And once he dedicated a beautiful Spanish song to me on KNW radio. He said to Don, my best friend, "I love." He made other song dedications to me. I made song dedications to him. And on my answering machine, he left the message, "I love you," hugs and kisses. He told me he looked at my photo when he masturbated. One time he said, "Think of me if you're masturbating or having sex." He told me he wished he could start his life over and grow up without drugs. Back then, I still cooked food. He called me from the emergency room at Presbyterian Hospital. He asked me to bring him some beans to eat. I took him beans. He kissed me and said, "I love you." And when he was in UNM hospital, I took him food. He kissed me outside when I left. In our last conversation by phone, before he died, I'm so glad I told him, "I love you." And Roberto said, "I love you too." Sometimes Roberto asked me to mention him on my TV program back then in the 1990s. My grave at San Jose de Armijo, beautiful dirt cemetery on Arenal on the west side of Albuquerque, is very close to Roberto's grave, just one plot between. Roberto died of AIDS at 31 in 1999. I love you, Roberto. Marriage is promising each other to be in love and to make love with only each other until death do us part. Many people want to get married, not I. So I speak now to you who want to get married. If you're a woman and a man, if you're two women, if you're two men wanting to marry each other. And here are many questions to think about deeply before you get married. Do you both want kids? If only one of you wants to have kids, what then? If both of you want kids, how many kids? 1, 5, more? Do you agree on how to raise those kids? Have you each faced and gotten, start over on that sentence. If any of your kids come out gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans, will you both be fully accepting? How differently were you both raised by your parents? Are you both religious? The same religion? If one of you is not religious, will you raise your kids to be religious or not? Are you both opposed to hitting and cursing kids, no matter what? No kid should be cursed, no kid should be hit. If you're in different religions, how will you decide which religion for your kids? Do you both know and feel loved by each other's families? Have you met each other's families? And when you wrong each other, do you apologize? Or just pretend it never happened? Do you forgive? Many couples fight like crazy over money and bills. Does one of you enjoy living simply? Does the other want to buy crap nobody needs? If so, do you want money account together, or do you want to have separate accounts? Do you want to live in a small place or a mansion? Do you want to live in a low-income community with people of every color, or in an upper-income community of mostly white people? Does one of you need and want much more peace and quiet than the other? Much of the time, no TV, no radio, no music, peace and quiet. Do you each stay up late or get up early? Do you both enjoy many visits from friends? Is one of you much more neat, wanting the house to always be picture perfect? Does the other want the house to feel relaxed and lived in? Does one of you eat only healthy food and the other mostly junk food? Do either of you drink booze or use other drugs? Are you truthful with each other? Do you tell the truth to each other? Do you lie about anything? Are you open about your past with each other? Are either of you emotionally constipated and hard to open up your real, deep feelings? Do you both enjoy listening deeply to each other? Or does one of you want to keep the conversations shallow, just on the surface? Do each of you have longtime close friends? Are both of you or one of you committed to living fairly in our world family of 8 billion people? I have no right to much more than I need, while millions, many millions, suffer on far less than they need, hungry, sick, with no home, and cold in the winter. As of now, are you both strongly attracted to each other sexually? If sex is not important to both of you now, what if someday that changes for one of you? My dear friend Tom, a preacher who died many years ago, married a woman, and years later, after marriage, Tom realized his strong attraction to certain men. He and his wife stayed together, but she never fully accepted his sex with men. My friend Beverly knew before she married Frank that he was attracted to men. And that made it much better for both Beverly and Frank. She knew in advance. But often one partner has not realized or accepted his or her attraction for persons of the same gender before marriage. If either of you see or meet someone you feel sexually attracted to, do you feel free to tell each other, even if you do not have sex with the person you saw or met? Are you much more sexually attracted to other persons than you are to your partner? Do both of you enjoy cuddling together, naked and sober? Sometimes cuddling naked and sober can feel more intimate even than fucking or sucking. And I love those pleasures, no question. But cuddling naked and sober is also very special. Do both of you enjoy cuddling together, naked and sober? Are you or is your partner repressing big parts of who you are to stay together? Can you argue vigorously and still feel deeply connected? Do you realize you each have very mixed feelings about each other and your relationship? If either of you is starving sexually, are you turning to booze or gambling or hogging out on junk food or fighting over stupid things or becoming workaholics? If either of you is starving sexually, have you each faced and gotten rid of the shame and guilt about sex and about being naked with each other with the lights on? Have you each gotten rid of the shame and guilt you may have been taught as children about sex? Living together, married under the same roof, often harms or destroys many friendships. Are either of you making big changes in how much you travel, how much you spend, consume, pollute, to show your, to slow your part in the climate crisis? What about your politics? Nearly the same or very different? Where do you each stand on racism, on white supremacy, on justice, police brutality, U.S. wars? Before making a solemn vow to being romantic with only each other, that's what you're promising, like it or not, only each other until one of you dies, try living together under the same roof for 6 months or a year to see how your relationship works. Is either of you very insecure and jealous? Do you prefer to sleep in the same bed together? Or do you each want separate beds? If someday you separate, do you each refuse to blame it all on the other? How do you talk about your former girlfriends or boyfriends? That's a good clue to your partner of how you may speak about him or her if you separate. If someday you separate, do you refuse to speak about the other person as a devil? Is there anything about yourself you're afraid to tell your partner? Anything? Your past, your present, your feelings on any subject. Is there any question you're afraid to ask your partner about his or her past life, past relationships, beliefs, feelings? Do you both enjoy warmly hugging each other when alone and in public, wherever you are? If not, why not? Is passionate sex very important for one or for both of you? How often? Do you hold grudges? If passionate sex is very important for only one of you, does that leave your romantic relationship in trouble? If you both treasure passionate sex, do you tell each other exactly what turns you on and what turns you off in making love? Can you imagine a peaceful or a bitter separation and divorce if it would come to that? If either of you becomes severely disabled with dementia or paralysis, no longer capable of sex, you give your partner permission to have sex with someone else? I treasure passionate romance with men. I treasure hot, affectionate sex with lean, healthy men who have no shame, no guilt about sex with men. I'm attracted to and who are attracted to me. But I do not want to marry any man, no matter how much I'm in love with him, no matter how strongly attracted I am to him. I can be openly and deeply in love with more than one man at the same time. So I would feel trapped, I would feel caged, I would feel suffocating in marriage to just one man. I refuse to make this promise that I would later regret. I aim to tell the truth and to not make foolish promises I would want to break. Almost no diabetes among Native Americans before the Europeans came. Now diabetes is a terrible epidemic among Native Americans. Diabetes causes strokes, toes, feet, and legs chopped off, blindness, kidney disease, leading to dialysis. The three white killers, white sugar, white flour, lard, cause diabetes, fat bodies, cancer, heart disease, alcoholism. Fry bread is not traditional Native American food. Fry bread is reservation food made from the white killers, white flour and lard. The U.S. government gave that crap to Indian people. Fry bread is slow poison. Fry bread causes diabetes, fat bodies, cancer, heart disease, and alcoholism. Parents, all parents, never reward your kids with sugar shit, ice cream, cake, sodas, pie, donuts, cookies. Parents, set an example to your kids and never eat that sugar shit yourselves. Instead, eat lots of healthy sweets, fresh, whole fruit. Not fruit juice, fresh, whole fruit. Sugar shit is slow poison. And when parents reward kids with sugar shit, many kids grow up connecting sugar shit with their parents' approval. As adults, they feel no lunch, no dinner is complete without a sugar shit dessert. As adults, when they feel depressed or lonely, they reach for sugar shit. Feed your children only healthy plant foods, preferably raw, not cooked, no meat, no dairy, no sodas, no sugar shit. Most movies are crap, violent or shallow, or both violent and shallow. I would not watch most movies if I were paid by the hour, and I mean that. Most New Mexico movies are nothing to be proud of, like serving rotten poison garbage on gold platters. The gold platters being superb acting, beautiful scenery, well-designed sets, but the poison rotten garbage is the content, the message of most movies. Rotten poison garbage, evil or shallow crap. Nothing to inspire us, nothing to celebrate, nothing to motivate us to live better lives. I condemn Hamas tortures and murders of 1,200 Israeli civilians. I condemn the Hamas kidnapping of 240 Israeli hostages. I condemn the U.S. government and the Israeli government for murdering over 32,000 children, women, and men in Gaza. I condemn the U.S. government and the Israeli government for 75 years of brutal persecution of Palestinians since 1948. Many thousands of murders that Israel, with the backing of the United States, did of Palestinians since 1948, 75 years. Homes demolished, orchards destroyed, thousands of activists imprisoned, massive human rights violations. I refuse to vote for Donald Trump, and I refuse to vote for Joe Biden if they're both on the ballot in November. Donald Trump is a dangerous, lying dictator who threatens any freedoms we still have. Read Donald Trump's niece's book, Mary Trump's book. And she's a psychiatrist, and it's in our library. 34 copies in our city library system. The title of the book is Too Much and Never Enough: How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man, by psychologist or psychiatrist Mary L. Trump. And I refuse to vote for Joe Biden. I voted for him in 2020. But now he has the blood of thousands of Palestinian children, mothers, and fathers on his hands. He sends billions of dollars to the Israeli government that continue to mass murder Palestinian children, women, and men in Gaza. I moved to Albuquerque in June 1970, almost 54 years ago. I strongly oppose all war. I refuse to go to Vietnam to die and to mass murder those people. So I was allowed to do 2 years of community service, first in Arizona, then in Albuquerque. 2 years. Some young people who may have damned war as much as I do sadly did not know about doing community service instead of becoming U.S. soldiers to kill and to die. In the early 1970s, here in Albuquerque, I met my dear friend Martina Tafoya, who lived in Martineztown here. She enjoyed my taking her and her young nephew Johnny to the guitar mass many times at San Felipe Church in Old Town. I sang in the choir back then. I drove my 61 Dodge, the only car I've ever owned in my life. Martina said, if I have anything to say to anybody, I tell them to their face. That's usually a great way to live instead of being two-faced. She told me to bring over to her home anyone my heart desired. She enjoyed preparing a meal for guests, even though it took her a long time because she walked slow from a disability. And one day when I visited her, 3 men came together into her home. And one of them lived right next door and worked at the city jail. And one of the other 2 pulled out a gun on me. I don't know if it was loaded, and I sure as hell did not want to find out. Apparently, these 3 men thought that I, as a young white man, was somehow taking advantage of this Chicana older woman. The man with the gun took off my glasses and my vest. He asked me, "Why are you acting so calm?" Well, I was not calm inside. I was a good actor. Martina became very nervous. I was her friend, and these men were harassing me, threatening me in her home. She threw down her sugar bowl. She went up to the wall and started pounding her head against the wall. And she could have had a stroke or a heart attack. Finally, those 3 men left. I did not report this to the police. I did not want revenge from the men to be shot in my head or have a tire shot out on my car as I was driving through Martineztown. And for weeks afterward, when I came to pick Martina up, I parked on the street. I did not pull in her driveway. Less chance of her next door neighbor coming out, seeing me, and giving me a hard time. But one Sunday, I decided to drive in. That was quicker because Martina walked slow and I was then close to her door. Her neighbor man, one of the 3 men who many weeks before had threatened me, came out of his house. And I feared what he was going to say or do. But he said, "When you go to Mass today, pray for me." It was his way of apologizing to Martina and me. And months later, when I ran for city council and lost, I came in, I think, 9th out of 13. Martina told me that neighbor man had voted for me. Maybe that was the only time in Albuquerque's history when someone running for city office received a vote from someone who had before been in a group harassing and threatening that person. And later, how this man apologized to me and to Martina. In South Africa, after many years of bloody, cruel white supremacy against blacks, many meetings for truth and reconciliation took place across South Africa for speaking truth about the white people's tortures and murders of black people, and to bring whites and blacks together finally as equals and neighbors to stop the white evils toward blacks. If white police confessed honestly the evils and horrors they had committed against blacks, they could avoid prosecution and punishment in prison. And in one of these meetings for truth and reconciliation, an elderly black South African woman who had suffered terrible losses at the hands of a brutal white murderer under the racist white supremacy. And this is what happened. She stood in an emotionally charged courtroom listening to a group of white police officers confess the atrocities they had perpetrated in the name of apartheid a severe, bloody, cruel system of segregation. Officer Vanderbroek acknowledged his personal responsibility in the death of this black South African woman's son. Along with others, Vanderbroek shot her 18-year-old son at point-blank range, and the group partied while they burned his body, turning it over and over on the fire until it was completely reduced to ashes. 8 years later, Vanderbroek, who killed this woman's son, again appeared and took the woman to a place beside a river. And on a wood pile, her husband lay bound. And they forced her to watch as they poured gasoline over his body and ignited the flames that consumed his body. And the last words this black South African woman heard from her husband were, "Forgive them." And now Vanderbroek stood before her, awaiting judgment. Vengeance seemed inevitable. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission officers asked her what she wanted. And she said calmly, "I want 3 things. I want Mr. Vanderbroek to take me to the place where they burned my husband's body. I would like to gather up the dust and give him a decent burial. Second, Mr. Vanderbroek took all my family away from me, and I still have a lot of love to give. And twice a month, I would like for him to come to the ghetto and spend a day with me so I can be a mother to him. And third, I would like Mr. Vanderbroek to know that he is forgiven by God and that I forgive him too. And I would like someone to come and lead me by the hand to where Mr. Vanderbroek is so that I can embrace him and he can know my forgiveness is real." As they led this elderly woman across the silent courtroom, Vanderbroek fainted, overwhelmed. And in the courtroom, someone began singing Amazing Grace. And gradually others joined in until finally everyone there was singing the familiar hymn. And the man who wrote the words of Amazing Grace had been a brutal white slave trader, guilty of the kidnapping, the torture, the murder of many black people from Africa. But John Newton changed. He worked to abolish slavery of black people. And he wrote Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. Now I, Don Schrader, no longer believe in a fair, loving parent God. But I know with much help, we can wake up and we can change from our evil ways. And we can forgive our enemies, even if we are not believers in God. In the Bible, Paul wrote, "Let your women keep silence in the churches, for it is not permitted unto them to speak, but they're commanded to be under obedience." What crap. In the Bible, Paul said, "Let the women learn in silence with all subjection." Paul wrote, "I do not allow a woman to teach nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence." Talk about the Taliban in Afghanistan or Iran's government refusing to respect equal human rights of women. And millions of Christians all over the world believe the Bible is the inspired Word of God. The Bible puts women below men in many verses. If I were a woman, how would I feel? As a man, I support full, equal rights for women. I damn the Bible's many verses putting down women below men. And in the Bible, Paul wrote, "Servants, obey your masters in all things. Please your masters well in all things. Be obedient to your masters with fear and trembling." Peter wrote in the Bible, "Servants, be subject to your masters with all fear." Sadly, the Bible never once says all slavery is evil. And many white masters in the South who bought, sold, and owned enslaved black people were faithful church members. They believed God did not condemn slavery. Servants, obey your masters in all things. So if the white master beats your black brother for learning to read, if the white master rapes your black mother, obey in all things your masters. What despicable bullshit, evil. If the white master rapes your black mother, obey in all things your masters, is what the Bible says. What would black women activists, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, who risked their lives in the 1800s to take enslaved black people to freedom, what would they say about that evil garbage in the Bible? Servants, obey your masters in all things. In the Bible, Paul said, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God." Were the Roman emperors who threw Christians to the lions ordained of God? Were the Nazis that mass murdered millions of Jews, gypsies, gay men, communists, handicapped people, Jehovah's Witnesses ordained of God? Was the U.S. government that stole the homelands and mass murdered Native Americans ordained of God? Was the U.S. government that has murdered millions in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and dozens of other nations ordained of God? Was Stalin ordained of God? Was Hitler ordained of God? Were dozens of dictators who tortured and killed their people for over the centuries ordained of God? When two nations are mass murdering each other in war, are both governments ordained of God? Absolutely crazy, evil bullshit in the Bible. Millions of U.S. Christians say the Bible is the inspired, infallible Word of God. In the Bible, Jesus called God Father about 180 times in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Jesus said, "Your heavenly Father feeds the birds. Are you not of more value than the birds?" So Jesus is saying we can trust God to feed us. But millions of people, for thousands of years, people of all ages, have starved to death. Many of them begging God for help as their babies died in their arms of starvation. If Jesus said those words, "Your heavenly Father feeds the birds, are you not of more value than the birds?" If Jesus said those words, he was severely out of touch with reality. No matter how sincere he was delusional. False advertising for God. And Jesus said, "Not one sparrow will fall to the ground without your Father's will. You are of more value than many sparrows." Are the many atrocities suffered by millions for thousands of years according to God the Father's will? And the many natural disasters that have killed millions, floods and fires and tornadoes and hurricanes and earthquakes. Sadly, as a sincere young preacher 57 years ago, I did not question this poison crap. Jesus said, "If you then who are evil know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him?" Sadly, false advertising for God. I swallowed it. I taught it. I preached it. And I thank many people who helped me open my eyes. I wish we had a fair, loving, all-powerful parent God who helped all who beg for help. But all the wishing in the world does not make that true. God did not hear and did not help millions in the Nazi concentration camps, the gas ovens. So why would I expect God to hear and help me? Many military veterans never admit to themselves and to others they were conned to become soldiers. And many people of whatever religion never admit to themselves or to others they were conned into religion, often as young kids. Moms and dads, if you happen to see your son or daughter pleasuring themselves sexually, never shame them. Never frown. Never act shocked. Sincerely compliment them for making their bodies feel good. Sadly, millions of youth have loads of shame and guilt about enjoying sex alone in masturbation, or enjoying sex with other persons. Shame and guilt often from their parents who saw them masturbating. Shame and guilt from their parents who refused to talk freely about sex and to answer any sincere questions their kids have about sex or about anything. Many youth turn to booze or other drugs to drown their shame, to drown their guilt about sex. Many youth turn to religion that condemns all sex outside of one man, one woman marriage. I buy no expensive jewelry, none, zero. I like jewelry that is colorful, cheap, or free. often given to me by friends, a heart connection with the person who gave the piece to me. I have several silver and turquoise pieces from my mother and my dad and my dear friend, Roberto. I'm sexually attracted to certain mainly young men many years younger than me. Why? Sadly, many men much closer to my age are fat and not healthy. And I saw for many years the hell my mother suffered because of being fat. And my mother was glad to lose fat near the end of her life before she died of kidney disease. And often older men have lost strong romantic passion. And I want and enjoy strong romantic passion. And often older men are afraid of pouring their hearts into new lovers. Often older men have suffered past lovers dying or moving away or very painful breakups. So sadly, many become afraid of getting hurt again. If this nation were not addicted to war, if this nation did not spend hundreds of billions of dollars on mass murder weapons, those billions of dollars this nation spends on weapons and war could provide small, simple shelter for all the homeless in this country who want a place of their own. The billions of dollars this nation spends on weapons and war could provide alcohol and other drug treatment programs for all in the United States who need and want help. And many Germans who deeply loved their children murdered Jews, gays, gypsies, handicapped people, communists, Jehovah's Witnesses in the concentration camps and gas ovens. They used their paychecks for murdering people to support their families they loved. And many white people who bought, sold, and enslaved black people loved their families and white friends. And many white sons and daughters could hardly imagine their loving father beating and lynching black people or raping black women. And many U.S. war veterans never tell their loved ones who have never been soldiers the hell of war. Having close soldier buddies beside them in combat, blown to bloody pieces. Many U.S. war veterans never tell their loved ones about their nightmares of the kids, the old people they murdered. And many sincere Christians believe their loving God will send most people, many billions of people, to never-ending torture in hell with no pardon, no parole, ever. Millions of sincere U.S. Christians sadly support the death penalty, U.S. wars, and Donald Trump. Often people strongly love their families and friends, but hate and support discrimination and war against other people. When I wrong you, or when I wrong someone you know, tell me. Please tell me, so I can apologize and hopefully change to do better. Not enough nutrients can cause alcoholism. In experiments with rats, only 10% of those with full nutrition became alcoholics. When nutrients were cut by 1/3, about 33% became alcoholic. When nutrients were tripled for supernutrition, only 1% became alcoholic. In one study on people who boozed and smoked, an amazing 80% stopped without even trying when they received supernutrition. Dr. John Douglas found that booze and cigarette addiction went away when those patients ate only raw foods. No willpower was needed. Raw foods tell our bodies what is good and what is bad for our health. Dr. Joseph Beasley started a clinic for alcoholics in New York with the highest success rate in the nation. And years earlier, this same Dr. Joseph Beasley was severely alcoholic himself. And his brother, who was a lawyer, died relatively young from booze. The foundation of Dr. Joseph Beasley's program to get alcoholics sober and stay sober, to get healthy, the foundation of his own recovery and the clinic's treatment program was good nutrition. Read his book entitled How to Defeat Alcoholism. The author, Dr. Joseph Beasley. I thank very much Mark, Eddie, Travis for their excellent help in running the cameras and the controls many dozens of times for this program. And this program is number 137 in this current series. And I thank you for watching and for listening. And I welcome you. I invite you warmly to talk with me if you see me, if you want to. I love personal questions. I love heart-to-heart conversation. The deeper, the more personal, the more real, the better. I drink my fresh piss for health almost every day. I missed one day last week. Warm hugs to all of you who want my hugs.
Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music get you high, and when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine on. And when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine on. And when it's said and done, you'll